What is the name of the character?
Emperor Pigmentine. And yeah, it's my voice.
Does it surprise you? I mean, the degree to which Star Wars is still part of kind of our ubiquitous pop culture and appearing in things like Angry Birds. Does that surprise even you?
It surprises me that it's as extensive as it is. George, from the beginning, I mean, unusually, when various people came and said, you know, we've got this idea, and if you liked it, particularly if you thought it was funny, he said, yes, go ahead. And he's always been of the view that this was going to be good for the movies. You know, that they would continue to live and be talked about by other people doing other things with them in other forms. And this is an example of that.
Another audience question? Hello. Oh, hey there.
Hi.
Doctor Who's going to ask you.
Awesome.
Doctor, yeah.
Oh, Kate. Just wondering, what's your favorite moment as in for a comedy team?
I think the scene I enjoyed most was the one in Revenge of the Sith where the evil Chancellor really finally seduces Anakin to the dark side, and that's the scene in the opera. I mean, I liked it because it was in a theatre room. And originally it was going to be in the office, yet another gigantic office. And it's interesting that, you know, with CGI and everything else, I've always got a really big, real office. You know, huge room, long corridors, and an enormous desk. I said to George, you could do that in CGI. He said, no, that's got to be real. He said, the more powerful people get, the more their office grows in size. In rough relationship to the size of their ego. So that was always important for him. But finally he said, I think there are too many scenes behind the desk. I think we should go somewhere else. I know, let's go to the theatre. And the advantage of that when I'm watching the Squid Ballet, if you don't mind, I didn't know that at the time, nor did he, at his latex. I said, well, what are we watching? He said, oh, fix something, you know, it'll be entertaining, okay. So the great thing about the scene was I could be positioned as you and I are now. And so while I was pouring poison, as it were, into Anakin's ear, I could also look in that direction and not look as if I was looking at the camera, but looking at the stage. So it enabled two things to go on at once. So for that reason, I suppose that's my favorite scene.
Well, in terms of scenes, I couldn't see the trailer, but I believe it was referenced in the trailer as well, the scene where the Emperor turns around in the chair.
Yes, the chair.
Is it true that the swivel didn't work? That was
well, it's sort of course, it was, you know, hydraulically operated and so on, and swiveled around with great joy. And then we came to do the scene. And so I would just sit there and wait to be swiveled. And obviously not talk until I'm in full view. And go past like that. I would go past like that. Something like your eye would jump, you know, cut, just like that. Just like what you've seen. And these guys didn't know that. They made that up. But I was able to tell them, as you might see if you watch that a little more times, because there's a tiny little documentary feature end that goes alongside it. What I ended up doing was moving the chair with my feet. So I was doing this while it was immensely serious and horribly evil. With the top half of my body, the bottom half of my body, my legs, my feet were patterned like a duck. But this duck always hit his mark. And that satisfied everybody. So we cut the hydraulics and went back to the Heath Robinson method. The human being was in charge.
Great. Another question from the floor. Where's our friend? Oh, right over there.
I'm a big fan of your work, but my question is, there's an internet rumor floating around that you might be reprising the role in the new episode 7 sequel. Can you comment on that, and as well, anything else that we might see that you know in episode 7?
Well, there are so many rumors, and I, like you, know nothing, really, because there are no facts yet. We know that John Williams is doing the music. That we know. Kennedy announced that when we were all in Essen. But she and everyone else is unable to say anything else at the moment because I understand they're still working on the script. There have been all sorts of rumors and no conversations have been had and no deals have been struck. And anyway, I'm dead. But I could be resurrected, yes. I've heard of ghosts, I've heard of clones. There are all sorts of possibilities. But until I get that phone call, like the one I had before, I won't believe I'm in it. And I think I probably won't be, because it's a whole new world now, episode 7, I think, that's going to be invented. There might be some old favourites in it. But I should imagine it's about the adventures of the descendants of the principal characters and new villains that no one except George has ever imagined. And I hope it is, because the great thing about continuing the saga is it will continue in a new form with new people and be reinvented. Just like all great works of art are sooner or later. Shakespeare, which George isn't remotely pretentious about this, but you know, the story arc of Star Wars is Shakespearean. And the great thing about Shakespeare plays is that now they are regularly reinvented. Fresh blood arrives and new ideas are thrown out. And I think that will happen with the new saga. And like you, I can't wait to see it.
And nobody really dies in sci-fi. Would you like to see Ian back in episode 7?
They took a week to kill me, you know, and that's expensive. You know. So if they bring me back, I don't know how long that would take.
What are your thoughts on J.J. Abrams helming the episode 7 of the next one?
Yeah, I think everybody thinks that's a good idea. Just because he's a terrific director, his work on many films proves, and I suppose particularly Star Trek, although we know that is a completely different universe. And a couple of writers have worked on previous series, really good ones, like, for example, Larry Kasdan. I understand working on the new scripts, and some new people too. So I think that's great. And George, I think, is very pleased to relinquish, you know, his control on it. He's around in the background, to understand it, probably in the foreground. You'd be very silly to make a Star Wars film like talking to George Lucas, because he's the one with the story. And will continue to be so. But I know the whole process of handing on to other people, the younger generation, has always been at the back of his mind. And now that he has sold Lucasfilm, given up the job of running it, he's just continuing what he's always meant to do. So that's encouraging, I think, generally.
Audience question? Hello?
Other side.
Oh. Wait. Oh, hello. You're over there. Hi.
I was just wondering, going back to something you said a few moments ago, how big is George Lucas's office these days?
Oh, it's very small. I mean, do we really need offices now we've got the internet?
Another question from the floor from that side, perhaps? See a lot of raised hands. There we go. Hey there.
Hi. I've been a fan for a long time, probably since you played the porter opposite Ian McKellen's Macbeth some time ago. And I guess you've had a sort of the same kind of career arc as somebody like Sir Alec Guinness, who's also had this long and storied sort of career in theater and in film, and has on the other side of this sort of double life in this world of spin-offs and lunchboxes and the whole expanded universe and all of the craziness that comes with that. And I'm wondering how whether you have any kind of strategies for approaching acting through that sort of double life of being on one hand coming from this theater tradition and on the other hand entering into this surreal place of Star Wars.
Yeah, I suppose there's no real dichotomy in a way. I mean, as I said early on, I was just still angry, really, from the fact that I am in charge of these gentlemen in front of me. It's a very, very big movie. And that I also do most of my It's all surreal, but life is surreal in some ways, isn't it? You're always sort of on the edge of a kind of absurdity. I'm just very lucky to be able to move from one to another. Alec had that too, although I wouldn't compare myself with Alec Guinness. He had an extraordinarily distinguished film career as well as a stage career. He played many great parts. And I know towards the end of his life, he was slightly disappointed, perhaps that's putting it too mildly, that most people would remember him as Obi-Wan Kenobi and would forget all the other movies and the great stage parts that he played. I think he was astonished that a film that he agreed to be in because he liked George and liked the script, he thought it was just this small film that he made for very little money, might be shown, independently, something turned into what it did. And I know that he was less than helpful when he was approached by fans and so on. For those reasons I've just given, I know that he disappointed one little boy very much, who asked for his autograph, and he said, "I'll give it to you on the condition that you never, ever watch another Star Wars movie again." And I don't think he was entirely joking, but he was a great actor, and it would be, now it's so easy to get hold of and watch all these great movies that he made. I think more people are probably watching them as a result of knowing who Alec Guinness is in Star Wars. The curiosity about his acting ability and so on leads people through the internet to other things. So I think retrospectively he would have been quite pleased about that.
In terms of playing the role of Palpatine, you referenced Shakespeare earlier, or he referenced Shakespeare, and you were talking about playing a Howard Hughes-esque character. When you played Palpatine, I mean, in Return of the Jedi, in that third film, he was unequivocally evil. But then when you got into the prequels, he was a diabolical politician. Surprise, surprise.
Yes.
But did you see him as evil? Because I've read interviews with other actors who have played abjectly evil people, and they've talked about the fact that you have to understand their motivation a little bit. So how did you see him as a character?
No, I saw him as a solid block of evil. I thought he had absolutely no redeeming features, apart from the one I mentioned earlier. Occasionally he went to the theatre. Even that was only so he could seduce his apprentice of the dark side. So it wasn't, you could criticize the motives. He was, I hope, a recognizable devious politician, yes, with a hidden agenda, which later became public. He always talked about peace and democracy, all of those words, emotional buzzwords, while setting about waging war and being the worst kind of fascistic authoritarian that you can imagine. I mean, we can probably think of a few examples. But when I had one